Welcome to the West Virginia Case Podcast, hosted by Les Odell. Join us as we dive deep into all things strange, including Bigfoot, aliens, ghosts, and more. Pull up a chair and set for a spell. It's going to be a great time. Now, without further delay, let's get the show started.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the West Virginia Case Podcast. I hope everybody's been doing well. I had a good day today. Had a kind of a rough day at work, but still a good day. I actually had a truck that I drive in the shop, so I actually stuck around the yard today. Done some work around in the yard. I actually done some work on an old forklift and got it up and running. So that's about how good it's been for me today. I do want to say thank you to all that's come. I want to say happy birthday to a good friend of ours, Linda Sigmund. I want to say, happy birthday to Seth Breedlove. And I don't know who I'm missing. Oh, and I want to say happy birthday to Dave. Dave, hey, I know we're a day or so out after your birthday, but happy birthday. I see you there in the chat room there. I also want to give thoughts and prayers to everybody down in Florida after this second storm has hit. I see there might be another one coming in sometime later next week. Hopefully that doesn't happen, to be honest with you. Hey, Anita, how you doing? But tonight I got a special guest on. I got Mr. Todd Neiss coming on. Todd Neiss is a Bigfoot investigator, Bigfoot researcher, and experiencer. We're going to talk to him about his experience, some of his background with his research, and just like we normally do, just chit chat. And if any of you have questions, just let me know. Put it in all caps in there so I can see them when they come up, and we'll go from there. Without further ado, let's bring on Mr. Todd Neiss. Where'd he go? Where's he at? You there, Todd? We're froze for some reason. I don't know what happened. Are you there, Todd?
I'm here. Are you there?
Yeah, you're like froze up on me there for a minute for some reason.
I am.
Yeah. Your picture's all froze, and I don't know what's going on.
Well, I'm moving on my screen.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. We was just chatting, and everything was fine. So right now we're having a little issue. I don't know what's going on here. Can you hear me, Todd? Let's try this again. Let's try going back out and bringing it back in. How about now? Can you hear me now?
I can.
There we go. I booted you back out, or booted you out and brought you back in. We're good now.
Yeah.
Looks like it.
I get that a lot. How you doing, Les?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. Thanks for having me.
I want to thank you for coming. I appreciate it, and yeah, I've watched you on a few shows. I've listened to you on a few podcasts. I mean, I don't know everything about you, but I know a few things that you've been on, and I follow you on Facebook, and I thought, hey, that'd be cool to see if Todd would actually come on. So I'm happy and grateful that you have.
Oh, pleasure's mine.
Okay, normally the way I just do this is, though some people ask some questions, but normally I just, when you come on, just tell us who you are, what you're into. I know you were in the military. But yeah, if you want to go into stuff like that, just tell us a little bit about Todd Neiss.
Well, let's see. I am a native of the Pacific Northwest and a recent transplant to Arkansas, actually. Um, but love it here. We've got a beautiful ranch up in the Ozark Mountains, and I feel very blessed to be here. A little bit of an adjustment. It's little Jurassic for me. The different critters you got here, and snakes and spiders and all that stuff. Hell, the plants can kill you, I think. But anyway, I'm adjusting. I adjusted my radar. It used to be about 5 feet out from me. Now it's about 50 feet out. And yeah, I mow my lawn with a 357 Magnum in my cup holder just in case run into a copperhead here and there. But anyway, it's I'm getting the hang of it. I'm picking up on the lingo a little bit. I don't think I've got an accent yet, but a good thing I married it. My wife is my translator, my interpreter, so I can get by pretty good. But being from the Pacific Northwest all my life, really, you can't help but hear of the legend of Bigfoot and Sasquatch, and I was no exception. But I just always put it in the category of a good campfire story to just scare, spooky story for the kids around the campfire or whatnot. But never really believed in it. Never really picked up a book on it. Never watched any of the TV shows. And little did I know I would later become a part of that whole genre. But just by way of background, let's see. I'm 63 years old. Retired military. You brought that up, and it does play into how I got into Bigfoot, actually, and I'll get to that in a minute. But it's I put in a little over 20 years in the Army, wore a lot of hats, but otherwise just led a fairly normal lifestyle, I think. Growing up in the Pacific Northwest, doing a lot of things outdoors, fishing, hunting, camping, hiking, all that good stuff. Climbed a few mountains, and it just kind of goes with the territory, I guess. And got involved in sports all throughout my life: baseball, basketball, football, that kind of stuff. Always loved adventure, and boy, it's really turned into that for me. But yeah, that's kind of my background. I'm married to an Arkansan by the name of Angela. But I love my wife. She's a beautiful lady, and she keeps me pretty well grounded. But let's see. Let's just a segue, I guess, from the military to Bigfoot and how I got involved in the first place. On April 3rd of 1993, I was on duty as a combat engineer with the 1249th Combat Engineer Company. And what a lot of what we do is it involves explosives. We use them to, take out a bridge, take out a road, take out minefields, and conversely, we can put in a bridge or a minefield or what have you, just as well. So on this particular day, it was a Saturday. It was a pretty nice day in the Coast Range, Oregon. This is in the Oregon Coast Range, way up in the northwest corner of the state of Oregon. And we were instructed. Our training was to hit these 3 different rock quarries, gravel pits, if you will. And there in the middle of the mountains, with a lot of security, as you can imagine, to make sure civilians weren't in the area, we would practice our trade. The first exercise was using C4 to blast steel I-beams, basically melt them, and that would represent, what we do with the bridge columns and whatnot. Second one was a minefield where we had to blast a lane through a minefield, a mock minefield, mind you. And then the third and final site was a cratering charge, and this is where we would put in about 250 pounds of ammonium nitrate that we'd been soaking in diesel fuel for several hours beforehand. We dig a bit of a hole, and we put this ammonium nitrate in there with a blasting cap, fuse, light it, and get the heck out of there. Very big explosions, mind you, all of them. In fact, exceeded at least 100 pounds of either C4, plastic explosive, or ammonium nitrate. We also use dynamite, TNT, PETN. There's all kinds of different explosives we use just depending on the scenario. Well, we lit the fuses on this final blast site and got in our vehicles, and we were convoying down to a safe area where we could await the explosion and then go back and check our work. Pretty standard procedure stuff. Well, being a passenger in this Humvee, I fell in behind the driver, and we're obviously driving away from this impending explosion. And like I say, it was a nice day, and so I had the window down, and having been a hunter in that area, that particular hunting unit, the Saddle Mountain unit, I was looking pretty much for wildlife, deer, elk, whatever I could lay my eyes on, and got a little more than what I had bargained for. We came past this tall stand of trees, and the tree line dropped down where they had recently replanted some fir trees. And as we got into this where the tree level dropped down, the second blast site came into view, the one that we had detonated, like I said, this mock minefield. So we had detonated quite a bit of C4, mostly probably an hour before that, right? So, and we're talking, like I say, large explosions, big mushroom cloud going up over 1,000 feet, and a little mini earthquake in the process. But as we rounded that corner in that second blast site, that gravel pit came into view, I see these three dark figures standing right out in the open in this gravel quarry. And my first, I remember my first thought was, what the hell are those people doing down there? Because when we do this, we practice our trade, especially, you can imagine the danger involved. Everybody has to be accounted for, and we don't send people out 1, 2, 3 at a time. Everybody's in a consolidated group. So my first thought, what are these three individuals doing down there? And then the more I looked and watched these individuals, I realized in very short, or probably just a second or two, that what I was looking at were not people at all. And by that, I mean, the profile of their body. First of all, we're talking, all three individuals were built very much like bodybuilders, extremely broad shoulders, barrel chested. You can literally see the chest tapering down to a waist. But it was like the arms. The arms went well down below their knees on all three of them. The legs also seemed disproportionately long in comparison to a human torso. And they were huge. And by huge, I mean the biggest of the three stood in the middle, probably between 8 and 9 feet in height, and the two either side of it came up to its shoulders. I'd estimate at least 7 feet in height, easily, and all, like I say, just enormous, and not a stitch of clothing on them either. They were just jet black, hair covered, I presumed, and but it was the activity as well that sold it to me, was because that one in the middle stood there very still, almost like a statue. But uh, the two that flanked it on its left and right, were swaying back and forth, both of them shifting weight from one foot to the other, and rocking side to side. And in the process, these long pendulous arms are swinging back and forth in front of their knees. Definitely not human behavior, right? So they're obviously watching our convoy. We're across this ravine, coming down this, getting away from this, like I say, this bomb we've just lit the fuses on, and they did this swaying motion. The two did this swaying motion the entire time I looked at him, and by entire time, I don't mean 5 or 10 seconds of a glimpse of something. I watched them for, I would say, easily 20 to 25 seconds, which, yeah, it doesn't seem like a long time, but when it comes to what I was looking at, it seemed like an eternity. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just in shock, as you can imagine. I couldn't take my eyes off them, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around, what I'm looking at. But there was no question that what these things were obviously what people have described as Bigfoot or Sasquatch in the past. And 25 seconds passed by, and we rounded another corner. I lost sight of them, and I just slumped back in my seat. And as you can imagine, my mind was swimming with hundreds of questions and really no answers. Wasn't long before we got down to that staging area, maybe another minute at the most. And when we pulled in, my first instinct was to run back in the direction we came. I really wanted to see them again. And I went as far as I dared. Like I say, everybody has to be accountable for that, means in eyesight of the rest of the group. And I went several hundred yards. And unfortunately, there was a small hill that was blocking my view of that rock quarry, so I wasn't able to get another viewing of them. But it was as I was standing there with my hand up to my forehead, straining on my tiptoes, trying to see what I could see, that somebody called out my name. Off to my right, I heard somebody shout, "Hey, Neiss!" And I look over, and Sergeant Martin, Jeff Martin's walking up my direction, smoking on a cigarette, and he says, "What are you looking at?" And I said, "I don't nothing." And he just continued coming up my way and got right up to me and stared me right in the eyes and said, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at that second blast site." And I'm not going to be, I wasn't going to be the fool, considering I didn't know what he saw. But, obviously I hoped he would say what I wanted to hear. But I said, "No, I said, I don't know, Jeff, what did you see?" And he went on to describe exactly what I just described to you. Three individuals, very large, non-human, covered in dark hair. And he just said, "Bigfoot, I guess." And I, of course, at that, I said, "Well, yeah, I saw them too." So, it was nice to have that corroboration, and to know somebody else had shared what I did that day. But had he not come forward, it wouldn't really have impacted my experience, because I could close my eyes right now and see it as if it were yesterday. And I'll never forget it. You can't unsee something like that. But again, it was nice to know that moment was shared with Sergeant Martin, and then it would come to pass the following month that two more soldiers came forward, independent of each other, and also admitted to seeing it. So it's unusual in terms of most sightings. Not only the nature of what we're doing out there, we were blowing up the woods. We were making some very large explosions out there up in the mountains, but multiple animal sightings are fairly rare. It's usually a single individual, and to have not only multiple creatures there, but to have multiple eyewitnesses on top of it, just kind of make this particular encounter fairly unique. And I have to tell you, it changed my life. It absolutely changed the course of my entire life from that day forward. I was 34 at the time. It's just really hard to think how that just those 25 seconds changed my life. And you have to also think of, what are the odds? Because we could have drove through there 10 minutes earlier, or even 5 minutes earlier, or later, and they may not have been there. Or I may have been distracted and looking a different direction, but everything came together at that moment to create this epiphany that has really changed my life. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been a long, amazing journey, a great adventure, and that's how I got baptized into Bigfoot.
Well, now that you're baptized, how did it lead into your research and investigation process?
Well, like I said, I was not in the least bit interested in the topic. I wouldn't say I wasn't a believer for sure, or necessarily a ultra negative, it could never be kind of person. I guess you could say I was agnostic. I just didn't care. It was one of those things that I have to see to believe, and well, we can check the block on that. So the books, the articles, the conferences, the TV shows meant nothing to me before all of a sudden became priority number one. So I made a beeline. I remember going to the library and checking out every book I could find on the subject. I think I maxed out at like 10 books going out the door, and I can't remember the last time I was in a library. But and the internet was just starting to come on as far as social media was concerned. So books it was. So I wanted to know the newest, latest, most up-to-date information regarding this, which is natural. But in probably about 6 months' time after I digested a considerable amount of information and research on the subject, I kind of did a 180. And by that, I mean, I started thinking, these things have been around a long time, and we Europeans have been around for what, 300 years maybe in the United States, specifically the Pacific Northwest. And then I started thinking, well, the Native Americans have been around, well, we now know, for somewhere between 21 and 23,000 years. So who do you think's got more information, right?
Right.
those that showed up on the scene a few hundred years ago, or those that have been living symbiotically with them for millennia. So by 180, what I decided was I don't want, instead of looking for the newest information, I took it upon myself to look for the oldest information, and going back into pioneer stories, 1800s, even some in the back 1700s. Started looking into all that, and what you find, which is interesting, you're not going to, even on the computer, you're not going to find every story out there on these things if you're looking using the terms Bigfoot and or Sasquatch or any number of names they go by, and there are scores of names that different tribes have applied to them. But for instance, the term Bigfoot didn't even exist prior to 1958.
Right.
So you're going to run out of reference material if you keep, going down that rabbit hole. So you have to kind of use other keywords and start looking for things that are described the same way. And then you'll find that there's a lot of information out there. And I've, over the years, have befriended a number of Native Americans, indigenous people. It's not easy to get them to open up to non-natives, but they have an amazing amount of information. And when you consider that they didn't have a written language like we did, a lot of it was just by word of mouth, but it was important enough that they made sure that the stories were handed down very accurately. So, it's interesting. If you get into it and you start looking for the older stuff, you can kind of piggyback that with the new stuff, and you find so many similarities. It's uncanny. But yeah, so as far as research goes, a lot of it for me was a very private matter. Yeah, I was interested. I really got in it for two reasons. One, scientifically, I just knowing that they, in fact, do exist. We're talking something historically important. And then for me too, it was personal because seeing these things is kind of a blessing and a curse because, it's like winning the lottery, almost like seeing God and then losing sight of it. I mean, it's like it eats you alive in terms of wanting to have that experience again. It is a personal thing for me. I really, knowing they're out there and trying to do everything you can to position yourself in the right place and in the right circumstances with the right equipment is challenging, to say the least. And the odds, I'm going to tell you, the odds are against you. But I will spend the rest of my days trying to make that happen again. And I will say it has happened again for me. I've had numerous encounters, and by encounters, I'm not talking necessarily visual encounters, but encounters when it comes to these things come in many different forms. They can be audible vocalizations to tree knocks to rock clacking. It can be physical in that sense too, that having rocks, projectiles come out of nowhere without explanation, which they do quite often. Of course, finding tracks, hair, some cases scat, but some of there's actually a smell factor, if you will, because these things do have a very unique scent that I've only smelled once, and that's enough for me. it makes a skunk smell pretty darn good, to be honest with you. It's a pretty rancid, putrid smell that they can put off. I don't know that they put it off all the time, but when they want to, yeah. So, but coming back around, I have, as recently as 3 years ago, had some amazing encounters in, of all places, Nebraska. Surprise. But yeah, we can get into that as well. But yeah, it's been a fascinating trip for me, and ultimately, I had to make the decision whether I was going to go public with it or keep it to myself. And obviously, I chose the former. And it's led to a lot of things I really didn't expect. I've been a public speaker now at over, I'd say, close to 30 different conferences, and different. I've been on different television shows, newscasts, documentaries, TV series, different shows. I actually have a conference I put on annually and have been doing for 17 years, which is very unique. I don't know. You may have heard of it, called Beachfoot.
Mm-hmm.
It's different than anybody else's conference. There's nothing like it. And we can talk about that as well. But anyway, I'm rambling on. And so you have a specific question?
No, you like I said, you can talk about whatever you want. Tell us a little bit about. Well, you mentioned the smell. I just want to start with that real quick. I know a lot of people believe that they have a gland of some sort. Some say in their armpit and stuff like that. Do you feel that's a possibility, or do you feel that that it's maybe just their environment? Like some people, like some Native Americans call them stone giants because these things rolled in mud and whatever else, and the hair would be so matted that the arrows would bounce from them. And because I've heard many different things or many smells described, whether it was like uh,
Well,
mildew, wet dog, stuff like that, any of that kind of stuff. But I've also heard the gland theory. I mean, which do you think it is?
so I am very pragmatic when it comes to Bigfoot, or this species. I prefer to call them, in that I don't get a lot off into the paranormal, supernatural. In so much, here's my caveat: is in so much as I can explain it scientifically, and as of late, I've come up with a number of theories in the last 6 months that has checked the block on a number of supernatural experiences and being able to explain them. But getting back to the smell thing, I've only experienced it once, and probably around 2002, 2003, I was contacted by an eyewitness who he was a rock hound, amateur rock hound, had a day job, I imagine, but um, he knew that this one river, it's called Roaring River. It's a tributary to the Clackamas River drainage, which is in the Cascade Mountains, North Cascade Mountains of Oregon. And he knew a certain time of year when the water level drops on this roaring river, it exposes a lava bed that, of course, crosses through the riverbed there. And embedded in that lava bed, that lava field, was what he called common opal. And so he would go up there in the summers when the water dropped down, and bring his chisel and his hammer and his collection bag and his dog, and they'd hike back in about a mile, and he would get to work trying to get chunks or samples of this common opal for his collection or what have you. And the dog he would just let wander. He was there down on the river bank, dog's wandering, doing its own thing, and he's chipping away. And I imagine metal hammer, metal chisel, this very metallic tink, tink, tink sound is obviously very unnatural in the woods. And in this case, I think it attracted some attention. Something came to investigate. His dog started going off crazy, not barking, growling, and it went on so long. He finally put down his hammer and chisel and went up to see what the dog was upset about, figuring it was a squirrel, a raccoon, or something. And when he got up there, he looked in the direction the dog was looking. And in his own words, he didn't say Bigfoot. I remember this kind of stood out to me. He said I'm standing there looking where my dog's looking, and there is a very large gorilla.
Mhm.
And it's standing on two legs, and it's looking at my dog, and it looks very unhappy. It was grunting every time it exhaled, it was grunting. And at that, he shoved the dog, broke the dog from its perch. It was kind of, it was standing on this log, and it had its nails dug in, and it wasn't going to move. He shoved the dog off, and both of them ran very fast in an area that has no trails. It takes about an hour to get up to where, or 50 minutes maybe to get into where they were at. It took them less than 20 to get back out, and this thing took chase, which is very unusual. And so I was called to go and investigate, and I think we got in there maybe 2 weeks after the encounter. I went up with a friend of mine, Steve Peterson, and met this guy, and he had his dog with him, but this time he also had a pistol strapped to his waist, as did we. And he let us in there, and we went the same route he went, and it was not an easy route at all. Like I said, there were no trails. Some very specific places you had to go in order to get to where they were. So we get to where they're at, and sure enough, there's down there by the river is his chisel and his hammer and his collection bag full of common opal. So that kind of dovetailed pretty good, and so we set about doing what we do, and that's surveying the area, looking for any evidence. We did bring a long tape measure so that we could measure the distance from where this gentleman was standing and this quote unquote gorilla was, and it was 47 feet, not far at all. So imagine having a 500, 600 pound gorilla, quote unquote, grunting and looking very upset, 47 feet away. And again, it was odd in that it's not very typical that these things will chase. And in my guess, probably escorted them out of that area. What was weird, though, was on the way back out, we took the exact same route. We come to this area where the path that we took went along this on one side is the river, on the other side is a straight up and down rock cliff. Excuse me. We're walking right. We were there a half hour ago, and now we're returning from this encounter site, and we walked into the most horrific smell. It's hard to describe. It almost smelled like roadkill, but that had been sitting out in the sun for a long time. It was very rancid, very putrid. Smelled like rotting meat, to be honest with you. If you say you threw out a chicken into your garbage can the week before because it was past its due date or its eat date or whatever, and it's been 90 degrees all week, and you go to throw trash in there about a week later and forgetting you threw that chicken carcass in there, and it was like that. I mean, it was like it just filled your nostrils and almost made you want to gag. But that wasn't the whole thing, because what I don't know what the physics are, because it was very focused, very concentrated in one specific area. And again, it wasn't there 30 minutes earlier when we'd passed by. But it was like walking into a wall of smell. And unlike a skunk, you come up on a roadkill skunk, you smell it before you ever get there, and then it lingers with you for 5 minutes or so after you pass it. Which makes sense. Very pungent, very strong smell. You should be able to smell it from quite a distance, and it just will get stronger and stronger as you get to the source. That wasn't the case here. It wasn't the case at all. I walked into this smell, and it was like I wanted to gag. Like I said, I could take 10 steps backwards and not smell anything. I don't know how that works. I honestly don't. And if I proceeded another, say, 30 feet, I'd come out the other side of it and not smell it. Really, really peculiar physics that went along with it. It was very, like I say, it was extremely concentrated in one spot. Now, getting back to the theory as to how that happens, do I think they smell like that all the time? I don't think so. Can they excrete a scent like a skunk can? Then again, just going back to science and history, if you read about, you just Google gorillas and smell or scent, and you'll find that they do, in fact, have glands in their lower arms, actually, not the armpit, but in their forearms. There are some glands that they can trigger under certain circumstances. What those are is yet to be determined, but I'm guessing in our case, this thing had to have been still in the area. Probably heard us returning back along this route and just left his calling card there. But again, Steve and I actually even did a cursory grid search through the tall ferns that were there and everything, looking for a source that we never found, and probably we didn't really expect to. But being citizen scientists that we were, you've got to kind of cover all the bases. So we at least eliminated that. There was no specific source for it, but dear God, it was right there, and something had been there just before we got there. But so that's my take on it. I think they do have the ability to excrete this smell when they want to. And as far as why, who knows? There may be a number of reasons, but they're sending a message, I'm sure, one way or the other. But yeah, so that was my one and hopefully only smell encounter.
Do you are you still there?
I am.
Okay. Do you, as far as that, do you think it's more of like a pheromone thing, or is it I mean, I'm not sure exactly how to put that, but or more like a musk thing, or how do you think? I mean,
I can only speculate, to be honest, Les. It's it's a trait that they have for obvious reasons, and what those reasons are. Pheromones are real, and pheromones they affect different species different ways. Pheromones generally carry a sort of an embedded message, if you will. Now, to us, it might have been just letting you know we're still in the area, kind of thing. To another, between two of these of the same species, it might mean something entirely different. It could be, dear God, I don't know if it was for mating, or again, maybe just a calling card. Bears will leave their scent on trees when you see them, look like they're scratching their backs on a tree. What they're really doing is marking their territory, and they leave an oily scent. I've had bears at my house on both of my decks at my Oregon home, and they've actually marked it. They'll leave an oily stain that and it smells. I mean, but then again, bears can smell 100 times better than humans,
Right.
and so it's mostly left as a calling card or a territorial marking with bears, and who knows, it may be the same thing with these. I really don't know. Again, I'd be speculating. I haven't gotten that far down the rabbit hole to be able to say one way or the other with any sense of authority, but it's certainly not there by mistake. So I think we can presume that they have that ability for some reason, and again, it may mean different things to different species. So that's as far as I know.
Yeah, I agree with you. Danny, there's a fella in this chat here. He says, "Do you think they are spraying like a cat, or more like just a secretion? I guess you'd say. I mean, I know skunk spray and a cattle spray. Or
Well,
is it more like a bear? Maybe a oily skin secretion that they're just marking an area with."
yeah. So, like in the case of a bear, there's a gland on their back end, if you will, that by pressing on this gland, like pressing it against a tree, like we talked about, they can actually excrete this and leave a spot. I don't know. I would refer you back, or your guest, back to just study other primates, study specifically gorillas, mountain gorillas, lowland gorillas. I'm not sure if orangutan does it or not, but if you just do your own homework, Google gorilla scents, and I think that's probably as close as you're going to get to it. Whether it's, I don't think it's just like body odor. I don't think it's like sweat or something of that nature. In this case, I think it's some sort of musk that they're able to generate and spray. I don't think so, because I'm pretty sure gorillas don't spray.
Right.
But again, it's something that some sort of musk, oily, probably musk, comes from some gland there, and probably on their arms if it's like the gorilla, and that's probably the closest model we're going to have. Then yeah, I don't think I would go with a spray option with these, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's time's flying by already. I mean, I could talk to you forever here, but I told you we'd be about an hour or so. But I do want to ask you about one thing. I do know a few years ago you I guess hosted, I'd say, or however you want to say it, a expedition called Operation Sea Monkey. Can you tell me about that a little bit and what the objective was of that?
So yes, I led this expedition. I designed it, and it was. I'm always trying to think outside the box a little bit. Try to do something that hasn't been done before, because let's face it, nobody's got it right so far, right? So, at the time, I was actually lived aboard a 42-foot motor yacht on the Columbia River in just outside of Portland, and I lived aboard this yacht I had it for a little over 6 years. I think I lived aboard almost 4 years. A pretty spacious boat slash ship, really. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, pretty spacious. And it was one that was rated as a coastal cruiser. So I got this idea because I really wanted to get up into British Columbia and do some research by boat, which to my knowledge, nobody had done at that time, or if they had, not in the along the lines that I had intended to. Ultimately, I wanted to take my yacht up there and spend an entire summer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been part of one of the goals of my nonprofit conservancy, the American Primate Conservancy. It's been stated in our pamphlets that that this was one of our phases that we were planning on once I retired from the military. But as it happened, somebody read that, a gentleman from British Columbia, and it was right around, this was 2016, right around it was first week of September, so right around Labor Day. He came and visited me at my home in Oregon, and read that brochure, and he turned to me and he said, "We got to do this like now." And I'm like, what's the urgency? Where are you going with this? He says, up where my tribe had lived, the Kwakwaka'wakw tribe lived on the eastern side of Vancouver Island. There's a chain, an archipelago of over 90 different islands that sit between the north end of Vancouver Island and the mainland of British Columbia. And his tribe, having once lived there, were aware of it was traditional clam tides come in between late September, early October. That is to say, the water temperature drops cool enough that any sort of red tide or dioxin that are in shellfish die off and it's safe to eat. So for tens of thousands of years, his tribe would go out on these islands and dig for clams, cockles, mussels, that sort of thing, any kind of shellfish. And he's like, yeah, we've got to do this by like the last week of September. I'm like, you're talking 3 weeks. And it'd take me almost that long to get my boat up there. He goes, don't worry about that. I've got connections. I've got some connections in Campbell River. I'll get us a boat. You just put together a team and standard operating procedure and money. And we'll do this. Well, so I did I put together my first ever GoFundMe page, and within we got over $7,000 in donations within 3 weeks, and it pretty much covered most of the expenses, not all of them, but pretty much most of the expenses. So while that's coming in, that's working out. We've got a boat, a 50-foot trawler already chartered, and I had to put together this team. So this team included obviously myself and this Native American fellow, Tom Seawood.
Mm-hmm.
We were very fortunate enough to get Ron Moorhead. I'm sure some of your listeners know who that is. Ron Moorhead was part of the team. Thomas Steenberg, who is a published author and researcher from British Columbia, also joined us. Gunnar Monson, who has his own podcast and also owns Sasquatch Coffee Company. He's from Oregon, and he came up and joined us. So we had a 6-man team, and the captain of the boat, as well as 2 professional videographers, come with us. And obviously, I wasn't going to be able to spend 3 months up there like I hope to do in the future. So this was somewhat of an exploratory expedition to just kind of check out the feasibility, look at the area, look at its viability for research, and try some different methods to see what sort of techniques and equipment we could bring to bear. And so, yeah, it came down to showtime, and we got up there. We were able to stop at, I don't know if you know who John Binternagel, who's a very famous biologist, researcher. We stopped by his house on the way up there because it was right on our way to Campbell River. But we had a great chat there. Then went on up and got the boat provisioned with the food and fuel and everything we needed. And so the total of 8 of us went up through the Johnson Straits and into the Broughton Archipelago, and we spent a week anchoring that large vessel off of 6 different islands, and we had 2 inflatable Zodiac type crafts that with outboards on them that we could launch from the mothership. And so that's what we did. Our standard operating procedure was to explore the islands during the day, look for any evidence we could find, and then we would set up game cameras on in different strategic locations that we'd find, game trails being obviously one. I happen to own a set of specialized equipment, military issue seismic ground sensors. And these are, I have a kit of 4 that have a very sensitive, a spike, basically. You push this spike into the soil, and there's a 6-foot lead that goes to a transmitter, and it'll literally pick up vibrations in the ground of anything walking near it. And they're extremely sensitive. I've actually had them under the right strata detect as far away as 50 yards with a fairly heavy footfall. You could pick up something 50 yards away, and it'll transmit a silent signal back to the boat, a radio, UHF radio we have on board. So we'd we'd explore the islands, we would set up our gear, and then what we would do then is this large trawler called the Clottawa would be anchored offshore, and we had a very expensive pair of thermal binoculars slash camera that we would take shifts on all through the night, watching the shorelines, because again, this was the concept was they would come out to the beaches where these clams are, and generally at night. So we would take turns monitoring the shoreline around the clock, really. I'd take, midnight to 2. I'd wake up Ron Moorhead, and he would go 2 to 4, and so on. And everybody took their shifts. And we did this at 6 different islands. We didn't get the ultimate evidence that would have been nice, but it was a very relatively short trip. We were able to practice our skill sets and deploy the equipment that we had and make sure that was functional and that worked. I have yet to return and do it long term like I want to, but I would say all in all, it was a very successful expedition in terms of course, we've got all kinds of evidence of other wildlife and lots of photographs of large black bear and even larger grizzly bears and wolves, all kinds of things. So we were able to at least test our equipment and make sure that everything was functional. And so Operation Sea Monkey was, in my estimation, a great success, and I look forward to being able to go up and spending an entire summer up there. It's definitely prime habitat for them and plenty of resources.
Well, we got a couple questions, but I want to ask you one question before we go to those. Is there anything you would do different on your return than what you did the first time?
Yeah, I would have a functional drone. I had bought a brand new drone that was state of the art, 4K cameras. 6 blades, and I hadn't had much of a chance to try it out. I have 2 drones, in fact, so I was fairly confident in my piloting skills. But sad to say, when we got up there, it just right out of the box, we found out it was broken. So that was kind of a buzzkill. But yeah, I would make sure everything in that sense is functioning. And we've got, there's more technology that's come through down the pike, since 2016. And so I would bring some other technology with me. I'd like to get a drone that actually has a FLIR on it, thermal camera, because you can't hide from FLIR day or night. If you're putting off heat, it will find you. You can be completely camouflaged. It doesn't matter. It's looking for that heat signature. But it'd be nice to have an aerial platform like that. It would be nice to probably have perhaps a sister ship and another team, just to cover more area. So those are a few things I would probably change.
Okay. Well, we got one question here from Three Forks, which his name is Dave. Let me put it up here. Do you think that the ones during your training mission in the quarries were curious about the blasting?
Oh yeah, well, absolutely. It's a good question, but it kind of flies in the face of common knowledge or common thinking, that you would imagine, even if you're human, being in that area, but your common animals in that area: deer, elk, bear, cougar, fox, coyote, squirrel, I don't care what. If these were very large explosions, and when I say it created a miniature earthquake, I'm not kidding. The ground would shake for quite some distance, and this mushroom cloud would go up, some of them 2,000 feet up. So you would think any animal that witnessed that would be going the opposite direction from wherever they are in conjunction with that explosion, and feeling it and seeing it and hearing it. So like I say, it kind of flies in the face of logic that any animal, even a human, would not be foolish enough to, in that short a time anyway, within an hour, to literally go to the scene of the crime, to go to that very spot where we had detonated a considerable amount of C4. But they did, and it's a curious thing, and I guess it was curiosity that brought them in. I think these things they wanted to know what was going on, and they were able to put aside the fear factor that most animals would have. And imagine yourself, even as a human, if you're in that area. Keep in mind, we've said this was that second of 3 very large explosions, and there were more to come. And as a just a person, if you were out in the woods and you start to hear these explosions and seeing these mushroom clouds going up, and not knowing how many are to follow, I as a person wouldn't venture anywhere near where all that activity is going, just for my own personal safety. But the need to know, curiosity, is in and of itself a sign of intelligence, is it not?
Right.
So they were so inquisitive that they were able to overcome the fear factor, because they had to know what was going on, who was doing it, and where it was happening, on if and when it's going to happen again. I think these 3 were probably sent on a scouting mission to observe us and to basically try to understand what was going on, and locate where we were at that time, and perhaps bring that information back to the rest of them. Yeah, so it was it was just unusual for, I mean, and frankly, where they were at was they were technically in potential danger of having a lot of shrapnel and some rocks and what have you raining down on them from the blast that was about to go off. After I had seen them, that blast went off maybe 7 or 8 minutes after I lost sight of them. So, hopefully they weren't hurt. I don't think they probably were, but that to me says a lot.
Yeah.
Just the very fact that they were willing to set aside the fear factor because of their need to know.
Yeah. Well, you kind of answered my question there, or one of my question I just had, because I was going to ask you, in relation to the blasting and where these things were at, if humans were in the same location during the blasting, would there have been any physical effects or physical effects to a human, or do you think these things would have had the same kind of, would something happen to them as well?
Well, I'm not sure I follow your question, but I would say this, that if anybody was within several hundred yards, 300-400 yards away from these explosions, they were in danger. I can tell you that right now. We're talking 4 or 5 football fields away. I guarantee you there'd be rocks and
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff raining down on them. These were that big of explosions. Um,
What about like a shock wave or anything like that? Could they have been affected by something like that?
oh yes, absolutely. Kind of glad you brought that up because there is a great deal of my research as of late. I talked about what I've been kind of finding some new information after all these years. Involves infrasound. Infrasound can be made naturally by a number of different animals, elephants, hippopotamus, whales, tigers. They all can create, and by infrasound, I mean sound, sonic waves, if you will. In the case of like alligators, they literally they emit infrasound
Hmm.
um, as a mating call, and you could have a body of water with some alligators completely submerged out of sight, and the water when they do this actually looks like it's almost boiling just from those seismic shock waves. And infrasound can also be generated synthetically or man-made, if you will, non-organic. But those shock waves, those sonic waves, would be felt for quite a ways. And in fact, they've been in my research on infrasound, and I do believe the Bigfoot actually can themselves generate it, and it will go a long ways. I don't think we have enough time to really get down that rabbit hole, but it'll go a long ways to explain a lot of the paranormal, supernatural things that people are experiencing. But you go back, just talk about explosions back, and of course they didn't have any way to measure infrasound back in the early 1900s, but they discovered, or they've been able to determine, now that we do know more about it, that this this thing that back then was called shell shock.
Hmm.
Today it used to be PTSD, actually, in many cases, or battle fatigue, is brought on by being exposed to these shock waves. And in World War I, there were people who suffered this shell shock, even though they were miles away from where any of the artillery was landing. In some cases, they were 2 or 3 miles away. But these artillery rounds, when they went off, created a shock wave, as you can imagine, that was below human hearing. Or certain aspects of it were, that would literally travel through the ground and actually affect people miles away from the actual source. So when you think about it in those terms, they could have easily have been affected, stunned. I would suspect. A lot of people ask me, "Do you think he might have gotten injured?" I don't know. I don't know how close they were or how close we were to them. There is a possibility that something like that may have happened. I hope it didn't, but yeah, they're you can feel sound even though you may not hear it. So that's a whole nother chapter and book right there.
Yes, I mean, shock waves can affect more than the ground. I mean, they actually affect the air as well. I mean,
And
I've seen that,
water.
and
Yeah.
water. I've seen that firsthand. Years ago, I worked in a stone quarry, and I was actually a truck driver on the stone quarry. But one day I was put with the dynamite man to put off I think it was a 120 shot hole or 120 hole shot, and this guy was kind of a loony dude. You know, he's like, yeah, we're gonna put it off the shot. And I said, okay, where are we gonna go to be away? He said, we're just gonna hide under this old truck bed, Ute truck bed. I'm like, well, that's not that far off. He's like, yeah, but we'll be okay, you know. And we're hiding under that truck bed. And he said, all right, I'm getting ready to do it. And he set off the shot. And I remember you see the ground upheave. And then I
Hmm.
remember kind of peeking outside the bed, and I could see the shockwave actually roll. I could see the air. I could see it change the air in a way, the dust in the air. You could see it roll
Oh,
past the bed. Um, but you heard the boom after that, but you could see that shockwave quick or quicker than the boom. And I was so taken back by this. I'm like looking, watching, this whole deal, and he yanks me back in, and it was just like what you said. There were rocks and stuff. Next thing I know, I hear, ping,
right.
boom. They're hitting the truck bed, they're hitting the ground, and but yeah, that was what my question was. If a human was in the area that these things were when you seen them, in relation to those explosions, what I was mean is, what effect would the human had compared? Do you think they would had the same effect on these things as well? I mean, that was kind of my question. I mean, I might have jumbled it up a little bit there, but that's kind of what I was asking.
I don't see why it wouldn't have the same effect. I mean, we're both flesh and blood with
Right.
bones, and I wouldn't think that they would have any sort of immunity from having the same effects that we would, and it could be very unpleasant. Uh,
Right. I didn't know if you would think their size would had any kind of it would affect them differently because of their size, maybe.
no, no.
No.
The thing about infrasound that's generated through explosives, for instance, is unlike higher frequencies. What we can hear, some of the higher frequencies, tweeter, mid-range sort of frequencies, they have a tendency. The physics of those higher frequencies tend to bounce. They tend to reflect.
Hmm.
As you go lower down, say below 20 megahertz, uh, they penetrate,
Right.
and they can carry a tremendous distances. In the case of elephants, they can communicate uh, via, again, not audible
Right.
to us. They can communicate between 5-7 kilometers away, and in that communique, they may call the herd together. For instance,
Right.
whales.
Right.
Whales have known to do it for hundreds of miles, if not thousands of miles, to be able to send out a sonic wave. We're talking energy, okay?
Right.
We're talking energy that will travel, especially in water. Water's a tremendous medium
Right.
for sound waves. To the point where now the United States Navy and probably some other countries are now experimenting with communicating via infrasound, uh, because that message will travel through water. It will get there, and it can be scrambled. encrypted and decrypted on the other end. Takes a little while to get there, but it will go out. And like I say, whales have been doing it for millions and millions of years, and it helps them identify where other pods are and bring them together for mating or feeding or what have you. It's pretty amazing stuff, and if our Bigfoot friends do it, and I have no reason not to believe they don't. In fact, I've got a number of reasons to believe they do. It's a pretty handy tool to have. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, we're like an hour and 15 minutes here. I don't know how much longer. I mean, I know you said you might have to go to the restroom and stuff like that, but I'm right there with you. I'm getting older, and sometimes that's just after a little time, it's ready to go.
Yeah, guys got to eat too,
Yeah, me. Yeah, same here. I just got off work a little bit ago and I haven't eaten yet.
Anyway, I would love to talk more. Maybe we can plan on a part 2. Is that doable?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so much. I mean, it's so hard to we haven't even scratched the surface when you're talking more than 3 decades of research. I'm finally writing a book, which is way long overdue, but it's always for me been difficult to find a point where I can just find a stopping point in my research and draw a line and go, okay, here's what I got, because I know 6 months later it's going to change. It always does. There's always new things coming up, but I've just got to do it. It's just got to put it down as a snapshot. This is where I'm at right now. Stay tuned. Might be some new additions coming out just to kind of update stuff. But there is so much to talk about. So many different experiences that I've had, and I'm sure there's a zillion questions out there that we haven't even been able to talk about. And I would like to actually get into some of the things I have discovered with infrasound and why I believe it applies to this species, the Bigfoot species. It answers so many questions about so much phenomena that people have experienced.
Right.
It's not, if you think about paranormal or supernatural, everything at one time really kind of fell in that category till we eventually understood it, and then it falls out of that category into simply fact.
Right.
But so there's no real magic behind supernatural paranormal stuff. It's just finding out scientifically how that effect, that experience, how that actually happens. And I think I have really stumbled upon a key that no other Bigfoot researchers have really, been able to connect the dots like what I have. And like I say, we don't have near enough time to get into that. But let's plan on getting together again. I've enjoyed our chat.
Absolutely.
I do. It's getting dark here. I do need to put a few things away before nightfall. But it's been great talking with you, Les, and I hope we can get back to pick this up again.
Absolutely. I will put you in the background here. Oh, first off, where can people find you? What do you got coming up? Anything? Yeah.
Time for a shameful plug. Actually, I do have a website. It's American Primate, one word, American Primate at, AmericanPrimate.org. Again, AmericanPrimate.org. My email address is AmericanPrimate@AOL.com. I'm one of the last guys on AOL. What else? I have a Facebook page. Actually, I got several. One is just under my name, Todd Neiss. That's Neiss. I've also got one set up for the Conservancy, and that's just if you look up American Primate Conservancy, there's a Facebook page on that, and then one for Beachfoot, which I really encourage people to go check out as well. because it's a very unique gathering of researchers only, not open to the public, private invitation
Right.
only, 100 people maximum, and they've come really not just from the United States and Canada, but from all over the world. We've had people from Australia, England, Russia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea is coming this next year. It's a very fascinating retreat for Bigfoot researchers. So if you go to that Beachfoot Facebook page and just go scroll through the photo gallery, and you'll see pretty much everybody who's anybody in Bigfooting has been there at one time or another, and many of them are repeat guests, and it's great to just get these guys together for 4 days, 3 nights, and around a bonfire, get them to actually bond with each other, network, and share information. It's something I came up with in 2008, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own. So those are some sources you can go to. The three on Facebook, just Beachfoot, or my name, Todd Neiss, or American Primate Conservancy. Of course, the website, americanprimate.org, is out there, and we're constantly trying to update that. Just click on the links, see what you find. And again, American Primate at AOL.com is just one way you can, if you want to write to me directly, that's my email address. So thank you for reminding me to put that out there.
That's that's absolutely. I mean, I the Beachfoot thing, I think is cool. I think it's cool what you've done with that. I've kind of looked on there a couple of times. I think it's really neat that you get a bunch of, the bigger name researchers, and there are some that I know are not. No, they're notable, but they're not well known because they don't want to be. And I commend that. I mean, it's not just something that you're getting all the people out there that's how do I say, the trending people, the people that are in the forefront on the shows and stuff. I commend that as well. But yeah, I want to thank you, Todd, for coming on. Everybody in the chat seems like they had a great time. A great show, great
Okay.
guest. I'm going to get ready to shut us down, but give me a minute. I'll put you background. I will chat with you just for a couple seconds after the show. And yeah, I'll
Sure.
see you in a minute. Okay.
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, folks. That was an awesome guest. Todd's been somebody that I've wanted to get on here in the past, for quite a while. And I was glad he accepted. I mean, I really am. I really enjoyed his insight, the things he had that talks about. Yeah, I thought it was awesome. And yeah, we'll get something scheduled for number 2, or for episode 2. I don't want to say number 2, but episode 2. And I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you all for the comments, interaction. Again, if you have anything you want to talk about, you want to share a story with me, just hit me up, wvcase304@yahoo.com. Most of you know me, through Facebook, so you can also hit me up here on Facebook. And until the next time, we will see you again.